There's a new poll from the Associated Press that was published this week that showed a number of different things, a lot of interesting stuff in there. But one of the biggest pieces of news to come out of it, in my opinion at least, is and this actually ended up being the top line for everybody. Usually when a poll comes out, you'll see the place that's paid for it will do it, the main write-up, and then everybody else will just sort of copy what they said. And so the top line that the AP identified was 71% of Americans say they want either somewhat or much stricter gun laws. And there's actually quite a lot of other interesting information in there. And even that top line, I don't think is that's bad news in and of itself if you're a gun rights advocate. But to me, the more worrying part of that is the trend that they've found since they started asking this question in this particular setup back in 2013. The number has gone up 19 points in that time. December 2013, it was 51%. Now it's 71 or 52%. Now it's 71%. So that's not a good long-term trend. And I'm interested in your take on this poll. Like, what do you think it means?
Well, so first of all, I mean, I'm always hesitant to give too much weight to any one particular poll, because we've seen just over the past couple of months, and we also saw, I can't remember what outfit it was, but I know you wrote about it, the Reload poll showing support for a ban on so-called assault weapons was at an all-time low, right? Yeah. I mean, that was just a couple of months ago. So that, it's hard to separate the noise from the actual statistics. But I think there might be a couple of things going on. First of all, since 2020, we've seen a big spike in violent crime, right? Not just, mass shootings that get a lot of attention, but violent crime has gone up by, homicides have increased by 30% in some cities. And so a lot of people may very well feel like their communities have become more dangerous places, which also accounts, I think, for the rise in gun ownership. Right. But, for every person who says, I want to be able to protect myself, there may be one other person out there, maybe two, who say, we got to ban these guns and then I'll be safe. So I think the crime trends have something to do with it. We also, again, over the past few months have had a couple of very high profile mass shootings in, Buffalo and Uvalde. And I think that has probably had an impact as well. But I wonder, too, Stephen, I mean, when you look at the trend legislatively over the same time period, we've seen 25 states adopt constitutional carry. We've seen, I think, in general, more states become more pro-gun than anti-gun at a time in which, according to this AP poll, support for more gun control laws has been climbing. So it may be that on some level, there are people who say, OK, we've gone far enough, or maybe even we've gone too far, and let's start to pull back. It doesn't mean that they're out there calling for confiscation, but, issues do tend to go in cycles. And it may be that, we hit peak nadir of support for gun control a couple of years ago, and now the pendulum is sort of starting to swing the other way. I think then the question becomes, what do we do about it? Right. And I think that for gun owners is the fundamental issue of how do you change these trends if, in fact, what this AP poll shows is even somewhat accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on a number of really good points there. The first one is, of course, this is just one poll. I will say that Gallup and Quinnipiac University also found, an increase in support for stricter gun control legislation. All of the post-Uvalde polls have found that, which is what you'd expect, right? Sort of point you were getting at there is you tend to have an ebb and flow when it comes to support for gun control measures, and they tend to that support tends to increase in the aftermath of mass shootings or particularly high-profile events. And Uvalde was one of the worst in American history, of course, and was sandwiched between two other ones in relatively quick succession. In Buffalo and Highland Park. So, it's not surprising that number has gone up in this AP poll from the last time they did the poll, or Gallup or Quinnipiac. I think it's pretty safe to say that the support has gone up to some degree. What interests me more than that And that's what a lot of these write-ups focused on, is just there's been a increase from 2 years ago when they did the last poll or whatever. But what you'll see if you look at the AP's history of that same question being asked over and over again is, yes, you'll get an increase and then a decrease when there isn't, when you're not asking the question in the immediate aftermath of a mass shooting. And then you'll get an increase again after the next one, and then a decrease. The problem is that that's still trending upwards over time, over that, 9-year period. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is the bigger concern, is where that's headed and what that means. If it's true. Now, Gallup has a longer history on their poll, and there were times in the 1990s, and this tracks with your theory about, rising murder rates having an impact. In the 90s were a much more violent time than right now, even still with these increases we've seen. And support in the Gallup poll was much higher back in the 90s, but also the 90s is where we got new federal gun laws. And so that's what I think is the core concern here, is like, as this support for stricter gun laws, even if it's just a generalized, I think we need stricter gun laws concept, as that rises, the probability you're getting more gun control goes up as well, especially at the federal level, I think. And we just did get a gun bill, right? So I don't know, do you think that we're past, it sounds like maybe you think this is crested already and we're just seeing the sort of after effects before these numbers come back down maybe, or are you concerned about them continuing on that trajectory?
Yeah, no, I am concerned about it continuing on that trajectory because, as you say, with the AP poll, when you look over the last decade or so, even the trend lines keep going up, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as gun owners, again, we always need to be looking at the arguments that gun control advocates are making and the arguments that are resonating with the American people. Because, listen, if you're a Second Amendment advocate and you're not willing to acknowledge that non-gun owners are the majority in this country, you're not going to be an effective advocate, right? So we're already starting out from a position of we have to be politically effective, be able to talk to and persuade non-gun owners that, gun control is not the way to a safer society, because many of those non-gun owners don't really care about the constitutionality of a particular law. Let's be honest, right? And so I think the argument has to be made on sort of different grounds. And I don't know, honestly, how good a job we are doing at that. Particularly, again, when the anti-gun message, I think, is false, but it's powerful. It's, if you want to protect your kids, you'll pass this common sense regulation, right? If you don't want to see, second graders murdered in a classroom, well, then by God, you'll call for banning these guns. Think back to Carolyn Maloney's comments during the House Oversight hearing with the Daniel Defense and Ruger CEO, right? Where, she literally asked at one point, how many children have to die before you'll stop making these products, right? So that's the argument that's coming out from the other side. And I don't know. Hey, I don't know. The media doesn't really want to hear from our side all that often. But I also think that, over the past couple of years, the NRA used to be a very effective advocacy organization, but you don't see NRA people on TV anymore. I can't remember the last time, Wayne LaPierre did Meet the Press or CBS Sunday Morning.
Yeah, it's probably been a decade, right, at this point.
At least, 3 years or so.
I think it's been longer than that. Yeah.
It may very well have been, but I think that we've got to be creative in how we are talking to people. And it starts, I guess, with talking to our friends and family and, looking for that audience of one as opposed to the audience of millions. But I think also, too, like we do need to be able to address and engage the arguments from gun control advocates and point out why they're wrong.